Yo guys, I'm back with another video. Today is Saturday and I have locals today, so I'm pretty excited for it. But I unfortunately did not get an SME nail set, so I will still be playing sort of pre-Supreme Darkness White Forest. But I did pull a bow, so that's gonna be fun to play with. And I might give a report on the locals when I get home, or maybe tomorrow. But before I'm going to go, I thought I still need to do that video on board breakers. But I don't have too much time, and when I say too much time, I mean I don't have like more than an hour. So I wanted to make a short video on board breakers, and I had this plan where I've actually printed out like a bunch of boss monsters, and I was going to set up fields, like play against an imaginary opponent and set up some fields and try to see if I can break them. And I still want to make that video, but I thought I'd sort of preface that video with a sort of general discussion on board breakers in White Forest, because that's good to get out of the way, because I'll have to explain my choices for which board breakers I choose to play, although I'm not at all like entirely convinced of what layout is the best. But I at least have some board breakers that I'm considering, and some that I'm not considering. So I thought I'd just show you the ones that I'm currently considering playing in White Forest. And I have been playing board breakers in White Forest for a long time, but of course it changes a lot with the new Supreme Darkness support, how we play White Forest. And also that also changes what sort of board breakers that synergize well with the deck. So sometimes, and also, you know, the meta is like really important for what board breakers you want to play, like way more than hand traps, right? Like Ash Blossom and Infinite Permanents are gonna be good no matter what, right? But board breakers are much more, you need to really craft your deck to beat a meta. So therefore, some board breakers that I played beforehand are not in this list, and I'll, I guess, mention them at some point. But I also want to say that maybe this will change, like in the coming weeks, especially there's YCS Orlando, I think, next weekend. And I'm gonna be eager to see what board breakers people are playing at that tournament, if any, right? Because it doesn't seem like board breakers are in a super favorable position. I mean, they never have been, right? But with Rigel coming out, there was this sort of hype around board breakers, not necessarily playing a lot of board breakers, but just playing a couple, because the pure Rigel Enfield is not that like unbeatable, and it's actually good to hit that choke point and then follow up with a board breaker. That can be a really strong combination. But I feel like in the recent weeks with, you know, and months with, you know, Anaheim really showing us that Fiendsmith Rigel is the most popular version right now, and really gave Rigel that sort of extra endboard piece in form of the Caesar or Desiree, and also the Paradise setup in the graveyard gave the Rigel deck more endboard stuff, and also made them less vulnerable to hitting the choke point, right? Hitting do it drive, because even if your do it drive gets hit, you can still do your Fiendsmith combo, which is very resilient to hand traps, and then still end up with a pretty nice board that might not just crumble to one board breaker like the pure Racial board does. And then also, even the pure Racial version is getting a lot more resilient to board breakers after Supreme Darkness because of Twins of the Eclipse, which makes it so that a lot of board breakers which previously traded 1-for-1 with the detonator now do not, because they will, like for example, change of heart. If you target the detonator, they will pop it into response, and the Twins of the Eclipse will trigger in a new chain and summon the detonator back. So you still got rid of some materials on the detonator, but they still have a 2-material detonator even after you used your 1 board breaker. So this hype that was about, playing a sort of mixed board breaker, mixed hand trap engine, or just playing a few board breakers because they're really powerful if your opponent ends on a half board because you hand trap them once or twice. That is maybe not the case anymore. And in addition, we have this new version of Racial, the Mitsurugi Racial version, which sort of does what the same principle that as Fiendsmith Racial, where they are no longer that vulnerable to a choke point on the duo drive, and actually they sort of, in that deck, the Racial stuff is more just a side engine, and the Mitsurugi cards are really resistant to hand traps because, once they set this up, you have to discard a card in order to use your hand trap. So, and their import is super powerful as well, right? Because this can negate, this can Raigeki. They also end on an Omni-Negate trap card, which makes cards such as Droplet really dubious if they full combo, right? And so in general, it seems like board breakers are in a tough position because monsters like Ameno and Detonator with a twins attached are just naturally super resistant. Like Amino, of course you can kill it with a hand trap, but you'll have to with a board breaker, but you have to discard a card in addition, otherwise your board breaker will get negated. And so while you might out the field, you might not have enough resources to be able to play, especially through their hand traps, because opposing decks are most likely going to be on hand traps. And so if you're on pure board breakers and you let them play uninterrupted, there's a good chance that they will have 1 or 2 hand traps in their hand. And so even if you break their board, and they search a ton of follow-up, both the Mitsurugi and the Racial and the Fiendsmith have so much follow-up, right? That it's hard to break the board and still be able to play through their hand interactions, and also position yourself such that you can deal with their follow-up as well. So it seems to me that when you are on board breakers, you just want to try to kill them. Also because a lot of the board breakers are not really great cards for the grind game, right? Like normal spells, if you top deck them, maybe they help deal with that board, but they cannot protect you on your opponent's turn. And so, well, we'll get into all that, how we can even break these full end boards. Like, I have done a bit of research, and I think I know how the end boards will look, both for the Racial Fiendsmith version and the Racial Mitsurugi version. Of course, we also have the Malice deck, right, that that deck has not changed too much, as far as I know. But I'm not too sort of interested in the Malice, or breaking the Malice board, because I don't think it's nearly as feasible. And I also think that my plan for dealing with Malice is just to have a bunch of cards in my side deck. So I know that sounds very saggy, but that is really the case. I'll bring up when board breakers are good against Malice as well, because I do think there's a lot of crossover actually. But I probably won't be doing a video on breaking a Malice board unless I can get some of my friends to help, because the Malice board is very layered and I'm not sure I would actually do it properly, like do the Malice and board justice. Whereas I feel like the Mitsurugi, Fiendsmith, Riot Shield stuff is a bit more simple for me to play out. So yeah, but that was a long introduction. But just a little about the metagame. Yeah, my drink for today, I have already started on it. It is just an instant coffee, really. And I need to drink it before it gets really cold. Yeah. But so, the question is, if we are going full board breakers, and I don't currently see a very good reason to do that. It used to be in White Forest that full board breakers was pretty nice because we are playing like 3 copies of Estella, and resolving or using Estella was a primary way to get to do our combo, right? Like our combo without Estella was significantly weaker, and so we were much more reliant on using Estella and having spells and traps in hand to pitch for Estella. And now that we have play as a Minal set, that changes a ton of things, because as Mina said, is like an extended that does not require any spells and traps, and actually when you synchro with her, she gives us a spell and trap. So it's an additional monster that searches spells and traps that we can use, and she also of course searches Deception, which can take and tribute monsters and basically turn them into spells, right? So we are not at all as reliant on having a ton of spells and traps in our deck in order to be able to play. And also because we play Witch, right? She can get rid of monsters and generate spells and traps herself. So I think in the past, like in Infinite Forbidden format, it made a ton of sense to play a lot of board breakers. I think in Rhoda format, if you were not playing as Amina, right, if you're just playing like a White Forest Toy Box version, it still made a lot of sense to play a ton of board breakers. Now we are not as like restricted by this, and we saw that in my previous video about just running 18 hand traps, and we saw that that was actually very feasible. Maybe 18 was a tiny bit too much, maybe like 15 hand traps and 3 board breakers would be better in terms of just seeing spells and traps so that you can play, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. And so the natural the sort of the necessity to play full-on board breakers is not really there anymore. And so just, you know, I need to keep that in mind, because I have an affinity towards board breakers. I think they're super fun. I also have good experiences with them since I've been playing them for the majority of the time. However, and I have also been very convinced that they were necessary, and that going full on hand traps was not something you could do in Wild Forest. However, that is wrong, and so I need to maybe look at these board breakers with a more critical eye than I used to do. But anyway, let's go through them, and I try to rank them by like importance and The first one we have is Black God Labs, and this is basically the best board breaker in White Forest to main deck, like by far. I think it's not even particularly close, honestly. This is like like in the hand trap video, I said like Ash is the reason to play hand traps, and Imperm is the reason to play hand trap. Black God Laughs is the reason to play board breakers, or at least a reason. You can just play this in a hand trap build as well. I think it's honestly, I don't think it's bad at all. And also, by the way, the Mulchamis, I see them as like hand traps and board breakers, but since I discussed them in the last video or in the video about hand traps, I won't bring them up here, but just know that I will definitely run at least Fubulas in the main deck, even going full board breakers. I still count Fubulas as a board breaker, and I would definitely run it in a full board breaker build, so just bear that in mind, that we are looking at around 18 non-engine slots, between 15 and 18 non-engine slots, and we are definitely counting Fubulas as 3 of those in every single configuration of board breakers. Yeah, and then probably side meows, right? But anyway, Blackout Labs is crazy good because, of course, it synergizes really well with the White Forest cards, right? And also synergizes really well with the Black Witch, in that you can just send this to the graveyard to summon the Black Witch, or send it to graveyard for cost for your little set or something like that, and you can just activate it in your graveyard, and it's actually a really potent effect. You declare one monster name, and then for the rest of the turn, neither player can activate effect of that monster on the field. So if you call Detonator, they cannot activate Detonator for the rest of the turn. It doesn't matter if Detonator leaves the field and gets revived back with Twins of the Eclipse. Doesn't matter what happens to the Detonator. It's a lingering effect for the rest of the turn. They cannot activate any card with the name Racial Detonator. And that is just incredibly strong, because not only does it out the Detonator, it also outs the part where it has Twins of the Eclipse attached and can revive itself back. So it used to be that Black God Laughs would never really amount to anything more than a 1-for-1 trade, right? Because, for example, against Caesar, call something like Caesar, they cannot activate Caesar, but it never like sweeps the field or anything like that. Just by the inherent nature, can only name one card name, and most of the time people are not ending on multiple monsters with the same card name. But with Twins of the Eclipse being in the game, you could maybe argue that this can actually be a 2-for-1, since sometimes they do spend resources on going into a Twins of the Eclipse, and sometimes they don't send it to the graveyard for X. And in those cases, you have sort of gotten a 2-for-1 if you call Detonator, while they have a Detonator with Twins of the Eclipse attached. So I think that this card is super well positioned in this format in terms of what it can hit. I also think that hitting the Amino, right, the Mitsurugi, let me just put them here, like the Mitsurugi, boss monster, it's like weird, right? Because usually if they end with it on the field, you'll probably have to discard a card in order for the Black God Labs to resolve, right? But you can just let it get negated, and then you sort of, because you just sent this for cost, right, you still dealt with an interruption. Like you still dealt with the Amino negate, even though you chose to get your black goat negated, right? It didn't really cost you that much. But you could also let it resolve and then call Amino, and even though you had to discard a name, you're protected from the Regeki effect for the rest of the turn. And that's like alright, but I think where it shines the most is when they don't end with it on the field, and sometimes they don't, right? They just end on the futsu, because the futsu revives it back. But if you somehow manage to get this card to resolve before they are able to summon the Amino back, and that's actually not too difficult, because you can send this card for cost with your opening play, and you can activate it immediately, right? Because it's a trap card in the graveyard, so it's a quick effect to activate it. So as soon as they get the chance to respond with Futsu when you special summon like Black Witch or something like that, and they try to revive the Amino from the graveyard, you can just chain the Black Goat Labs and call Amino, and then you get rid of both the negation effect of Amino, and you also get rid of the Raigeki effect of the Amino, and that is like the two strongest part of the Mitsurugi interruption, apart from maybe the Omni-Negate trap card. So, and then also against Malice, of course, you can call Whitebinder with this, and even though they will be able to summon the Whitebinder back, because Black Goat Laughs only says that you cannot activate cards, your opponent, neither player can activate cards in the field of monsters with that name, so they will be able to activate Whitebinder when she gets banished, or to summon herself back and draw a card. They won't be able to activate her on summon effect to banish 3 cards from graveyards. So I think this is good against like pretty much every single deck. It requires you to be pretty clever. You need to know the matchup very well. Like if you get put against a rogue deck where you don't know any of the cards, you probably will not be able to use Black Goat Labs. So it's a pretty skill checking cards, and sometimes I've been in matchups where I have no idea what to name, and that is very unfortunate. But if you do know how to use it properly, it is the strongest card in White Forest, like because of the synergies, right? And it's also extremely good going first. If you set it and activated it, of course you can also just send it to the graveyard and have it in the graveyard and activate it during your opponent's turn when you go first, if you need to send the spell trap. But if you can manage to end on it set face down, then basically does you name a monster when you activate it, and neither player can summon any monster with that name except from their graveyard. And so if you're like going first against Rachel, and they're trying to play through your board, right, you can name stuff like Exeter Knight or Detonator when they are on two bodies, like Exeter Knight, Detonator, you can like, if they try to go into the Fiendsmith combo, you can like name Requiem, and they might just not be able to break your board, right? Because if you take a Detonator away from Raziel, even though they might do their Fiendsmith combo, right, it's just very hard for them to break your board, right? Detonator is one of the primary ways they break your board. And against the Mitsurugi deck, you can just call Amino, and they cannot summon Amino, like because they need to ritual summon Amino, and that is not done from the graveyard, and so there's no way for them to summon Amino. While if you call it with Black Goat Laughs, and so it basically becomes completely impossible for them. Like you can just wait with this and use it when they use the ritual spell and call Amino, and they'll have to go into Futsu instead, which does absolutely nothing, and they can never get to the Amino for the rest of the turn, right? So yeah, and of course against Malice, we generally have a very strong going first, so maybe it's not too worth talking about, but same thing, right? You can just name one of the Malice monsters, like when they banish one of the Malice monsters and they trigger their effect to summon it back, you can just name this and they cannot do it. I don't know. You can also just name Whitebinder, or like, it does require you to know a fair bit about your opponent's deck, but it is incredibly strong. Not only because it synergizes so well with the White Forest gimmick, but also because it's just a very strong card. I feel like it's just underrated. I actually think it's pretty underrated, and I think most decks are playing it because going second, there's no reliable way to send it to the graveyard. But we have a lot of reliable ways, mainly the Bellstar and LZ. You can also go normal Stella and send it. That's not as good, right? And I guess that brings me to the next card, which is Foolish Burial of Goods. And this is sort of just more copies of Black Good Glass. Because you just send one Spell Trap to your graveyard, right? And you just send Black Good Glass to the graveyard and you activate it, and that's it, right? And so it's essentially more ways of having the Black Good Glass on when going second. Of course, you will not be able to do the nice thing where you send it to the graveyard for cost, right? You basically have to, you don't get any extra card advantage when you activate Foolish Burial and send Black Good Labs, right? You just go neg 1. Whereas if you send Black Good Lab itself for cost or to summon the Ballstar, you don't really go neg 1 at all. But so therefore, I think, it's totally valid just to play 3 copies of Black Goat Labs and just let that be it. I usually only play 2 in my current build just because of deck space, and also because it is pretty bad to draw in. It can be pretty bricky to draw in multiples if you're going second, for example, and yeah, I mean, nah, not really. You can honestly play 3, but I would maybe play a 2 copies of Black Goat Labs and 1 copy of Foolish Burial before I'll play the 3rd Black Goat Labs, just because sometimes you don't have the Bellstar, sometimes you don't have LZ, and for example, if they have a Caesar, right, and you can activate the LZ, of course, and send the Black Goat Labs, but they will be able to negate and destroy your LZ before you can activate your Black Goat Labs in the graveyard. And so sometimes when going second, it's a lot nicer just to activate Foolish Burial of Good and shotgun the Black Goat Labs, so that they have no opportunity to stop any of your engine plays at all. Like, also, if you send it for cost, send Black Goat Labs for cost with the Bellstar, of course they can, like, if you choose to activate the Bellstar's effect, or if you just go activate Black Goat Labs, they can just chain detonator and pop your Bellstar. So even though you do resolve the Black Goat Labs, you're still trading for some interaction. So sometimes it is just nice to be able to Foolish Burial the Black Goat Labs, immediately call the detonator, and then just start playing. However, I think I should bring up the fact that the Black Goat Labs has a huge weakness, and that is a card that is being played in the meta right now, unfortunately. And even though I do think that the Black Goat Labs is probably like the strongest board breaker we can play in White Forest because of the synergies, and also because of its position against the boss monsters in the current meta, there is this card called Abyss Dweller, right? And Abyss Dweller says that you Any card effect that activate in your opponent's graveyard cannot be activated this turn. And so if they, if they choose to go for Dweller against you, this whole plan with Black God Laughs and Foolish Burial sending Black God Laughs is just completely out of the window, right? Because unless you have like a droplet to negate the Abyss Dweller, the Black God Laugh will be, of course, not able to activate. And I'm a bit in two minds about this, because in general, our deck, like White Forest, is not actually weak against Abyss Dweller, right? The cards that we have that gets hit by Abyss Dweller, the cards that we have that activate in the graveyard, is our Hello Desmina to add itself back, and it is our Sylvia and our Rusha to summon back from the graveyard. That is basically it, right? And we don't need, those are not like mission critical effects that needs to resolve for us to do our game plan. It's actually just extenders, right? Like, we can afford not being able to fusion summon with Hello Desmina twice. Like, that's not the end of the world, right? We can still win that game. Sylvia and Rusha are just extra bodies, right? Sometimes it's important, but a lot of the times, if our opponent spends the resources to go into the Dweller against us, just in terms of our engine lineup, we should be pretty happy, right? Of course, also all the White Forest spells and traps cannot add themselves back, so our like resource game does get hit a bit. Like, we cannot send the White Forest spells for cost and have themselves set themselves back on the field. But again, like, this is like definitely annoying and definitely does do something against us, but it's not something that prevents us from playing the game, like, not at all. So I feel like people should not really make Dweller against our deck. Like, I don't know, it's just not, I don't feel like it's worth it for our opponents to put in resources on an Abyss Dweller against our deck. But then if you're on full board breakers, right, they might as well just do it. Like, if they can full combo every game against you, they are probably in a situation where they have some extra bodies and they'll just make a Dweller, right? You're not really putting in them in this dilemma where they have to choose carefully about what endboard pieces they go into if you just let them full combo all the time. Of course, you still play Foolers, so you can draw Foolers, and that can deter them from making Dweller. I don't know, it's like weird, right? If Dweller should not be that good against us, like, still decent, but definitely not like a game ender, like it is against Mermail or Crystron or something like that. So in general, I feel like our opponents should not make it against us, like, but then maybe they will, right? Because they know that we are on board breakers, they know that we are using Black God Laughs, and so maybe they're just like, hey, I'm not dealing, with Black God Laughs, so I'm just making Dweller. Like, that would be a super clever play. Like, a very heads-up play from our opponent that makes it like they make Dweller because they know our main board breaker is Black God Laughs. And so, but will people do that? Like, I don't know. Like, that's just so tough. So I feel like the position of being, or the viability of being able to go board breakers in White Forest is largely dependent on, do our opponent make Dweller against us? Are they smart enough or maybe just dumb enough to make Dweller against us, right? Because it could be that a person is like, doesn't know a lot about White Forest and they just make Dweller because they can, because we let them full combo, because we're full board breakers. Let's just go, hey, sure, I'll make a Dweller. It's probably good against them. And so they just unknowingly hit our Black God Laughs and we can't break that board. Or you're playing against a very smart player who does know that we are on Black God Laughs and has sort of sniffed out that we are on board breakers, or maybe it's game 2 or whatever, or game 3. And so they do know that they should make Dweller in order to stop us from breaking their board. And so it sort of like playing Black Gold Labs introduces a weakness that we didn't have before. Like our deck was not weak to Dweller before putting in like relying on Black Gold Labs. But now it is, right? So it's just tough. It's really tough. Of course, you can also choose to just play like 3 Black Gold Labs and not play the Foolish Burial Goods, right? And then you're not as reliant on having Black Gold Labs resolving, but I still feel that one of our strongest ways to push is the Black Gold Labs, and if they just make Dweller all the time when they go full combo, like maybe they just like auto make Dweller all the time, then then maybe it's not the right move, right? So yeah, of course, Foolish Burial Goods is also pretty decent going first, right? You can send stuff like Fusion Substitute or Metal Force Fusion to get a draw, so it can essentially be Upstart Goblin, and that is pretty nice, right? It just makes our deck more consistent. When we're going first, and then when we're going second, it works as a board breaker. You can, of course, also just send Black Gold Labs, even when you're going first, and just have Black Gold Labs as an interruption in your graveyard if you don't need the draw. You probably won't be needing, like, using its effect to draw a card by sending something like Fusion Substitute or Metal Force Fusion if you are able to play through their hand traps and stuff like that, because you are pretty vulnerable to draw, right, if you choose to use Foolish Burial as an upstart goblin. So it's only really for when you have a hand where you don't see a lot of engine and need to start out with an upstart just to get an extra look and try to find some engine. I feel like most of the time, if I was able to play, I'll just play and maybe even just send the Foolish Burial goods for cost to the graveyard, just so that I'm not playing into draw. And I could also maybe later, if I don't get drawn, add this back with Day Bell and get to do my upstart or send my Black Gold at that point. And you also have the magical Christmas land thing of sending a floodgate with Foolish Burial of Goods, like post-sighting, and then adding back the floodgate with Dear Bell, and then setting it like something like Skill Drain. And I will say that I have been playing this card for a bunch, right? Like, and that has never happened to me. Like, if you are in that situation, it means that you are like full comboing. Like you are so full comboing that you didn't need to send this for cost. You didn't need to activate this to get an extra draw. So like in any situation where you get hand trapped, you're like strapped for resources. You're just trying to find ways to play. And you cannot afford just sitting with this card in your hand, waiting to get to your boss monster, activate it before you summon her. And then you also giving yourself a massive choke point in that, okay, it's so telegraphed, right? Because you activate it, you need to activate it before you go into Diabell, because Diabell's, it's her unsummon effect. So you activate it before you go into Diabell. You send something like Skill Train, you're basically just saying to your opponent, hey, I'm going to go into Diabell right now, and I'm going to add back this Skill Drain, right? So you need to use your Veiler or your Infinite Permanence on my Diabell. And, you know, if they do that, if they have a hand trap for it, you just went neg 1. You went more than neg 1. Not only did you went neg 1 because you used your Foolish and didn't do anything, you also didn't get the add back from Diabell. So I don't know. It's just, it's a cool thought. It's a cool idea. And in principle, it makes this card very strong going first post-siding. But in reality, when you're getting hand trapped 2 times or 3 times, I have just never actually, it's just never came up for me. But maybe I just need to play more games or something like that. I don't know. Usually you're in a pretty desperate position where you need to send this for cost to activate some of your White Forest cards, or you just really need the upstart in order to find something that lets you play through their hand traps. And so saving this to do the whole send floodgate, add back floodgate with Diabell. It's just, in practice, it never happens to me, but yeah. And you can also, of course, just send Black Goat Laughs with this card, right? And never run the risk of having them hand trap the Diabell, right? You can just send Black Goat and that's already pretty good, and you don't need to worry about whether your Diabell is resolving or not. So I do feel like that whole thing is like very win more, and you should definitely not play this card because of that interaction. I think you should more so play this card as a board breaker when you go second, and a upstart when you go first, or potentially just sending Black Goat Labs to get an extra interruption when you go first, or just send this card to the graveyard for cost, right? Yeah, so in general, I'm not feeling too hopeful about this. I think you can definitely just play Black Goat Laughs, and they won't have Dweller every game. I hope so, at least. And then sometimes they don't have Dweller, and you can do the Black Goat Laughs thing, or maybe they do have it, but you can just send it for cost with something like Droplet. I don't know. But in general, running Foolish Burial of Goods, if they aren't, well, it just seems really rough, right? But I do think that this card is really strong if they're not, and well, like I do think that, just using Foolish Burial of Goods, sending it for Black God Labs, calling Detonator, I think that's strong. I think that's our strongest board breaker strategy we have, is like these 6 cards or some combination of them. Like maybe don't need to play all 6, but I do think that's the strongest. If you were to go board breakers, I think that's the strongest interaction we have in the current format. That also synergizes well with our deck, right? Black Goat Laughs synergizes with our deck. Foolish Burials synergizes with our deck, although maybe to a lesser extent. These cards like Metal Force Fusion, it's not actually terrible to play, because it's kind of like Black Goat Laughs, except it just draws a card. So it's worse in that it doesn't provide an interaction, but it's still pretty nice to send it for Black Witch or send it for any of the White Forest monsters. Of course, you can't play too many of these because it doesn't actually help you play. But it is a nice way to extend, right, and keep your resource game up. And if you play cards like Black God Labs and Metal Force Fusions that are nice to send to the graveyard, you could also play something like Rainbow Bridge, although I think field spells are pretty poorly positioned right now. Then other cards like Droplet also go up in stock, because Droplet sending Black God Labs is incredibly powerful. You could also maybe Super Polymerization, discarding Black God Laughs or Metal Force Fusion, and just, yeah. But I think I talked about those long enough. I don't actually know how much time I have. It says 43 minutes, and I think so it must be around 9 a.m. But yeah, I should maybe go through these a little bit quicker, or maybe I should just stop the video there and talk about the other board breakers, because I do have quite a few other board breakers I want to talk about. So maybe I should just stop the video here and just title it like Black God Laughs and Foolish Burial of Goods. Like, just name the video these cards. That's maybe a better idea. And I will also say that even though the Black God Laughs work well as a board breaker, I don't think it necessarily requires you to play board breakers either. Like, because we do have in-engine ways of using this as a board breaker, but so it's not like you need to play Foolish Burial of Goods if you want to play Black God Laughs. Like, other decks probably do that, like, but we don't need to. So but I think these cards are pretty strong. It's like you could maybe just play 3 Black God Laughs and and 15 hand traps. I don't think that's actually crazy. I think that's probably pretty strong actually. However, I do also think that something like thrust is pretty nice. So maybe I'll talk about that in the next video. But yeah, very unsure about foolish burial goods. It also has one of those deceiving effects on me where it has a lot of cool, neat applications, but no, none of those applications are extremely powerful. So yeah, do you think it probably is really good? It's just I think you'd only play it in a board breaker build. Like I can't really see this fitting too well with hand traps. Because yeah, it's like you have to play it with Black Goat Labs, so you have to play at least one Black Goat Labs, and for it to work as a board breaker. And at that point, I just think you would want to play Black Goat Labs over Foolish Burial, because you're pretty likely just to be able to send the Black Goat Labs for cost. And so you don't need the Foolish Burial. You'd rather just hard draw the Black Goat Labs in a lot of cases. But then, and then, so you're like looking at playing like multiple copies of Black Goat Labs, and then maybe a third card could be this, but then it's just like you're playing one random Foolish Burial of Good. What does that even do, really? It's not like a cohesive game plan. So yeah, maybe you could play like something like this and have that be like a like these 6 cards, and then play 12 hand traps, and maybe that is good. But then you're just like, okay, then I'm not playing, I'm not playing thrust, right? So it's like, is that really worth cutting thrust? Because thrust does arguably more for us when we are going first than Foolish Burial does, because the whole thing about setting up a floodgate with Foolish Burial is just much easier with thrust, because if you're assuming that you will get hand trapped, you can just set one of your silver bullets or even just your woes or something like that with thrust, whereas with this card you need to get to your diabell in order for you to really get to the floodgate. And if you're already getting to diabell, with only 4 cards in hand, right? So if you're just holding this, your other 4 cards will need to carry you through hand traps and get to diabell, and then you'll use this to get to your floodgate. Whereas the thrust can actually help you if you get hand trapped. It's much better in the scenario when you get hand trapped, because you can activate it, send your floodgate, or you can activate it, set something like tails in order to maybe extend further. So maybe this card is better going second, right? I think maybe this card, just shotgunning this, sending Black Goat Labs, that is maybe stronger when you just go second than thrust is. Yeah. But I think, I think that we need you. I think that this is the strong points of going for board breakers. Like, I don't think any of the other board breakers that are currently available or in the format do as much for us as the Black Goat Labs interaction does. But I don't know if it's enough for us to consider going into just full-on board breakers plus small charmies, of course. But maybe, like, you could maybe go for like a Fuvelas plus Parolia or something like that in the main deck, and then just go for like 12 board breakers, Fuvelas and Parolia. Maybe that is like more realistic, because it's also the case that you sometimes run into some of these like combo decks like Murmur, stuff like that, where you just get absolutely obliterated if you're on hand traps. or if you're on board breakers, right, you just cannot win against Mermill if you're on board breakers. And I also think against Malice, it's pretty tough to be able to win against them on board breakers. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe 6 more Chamis, 12 board breakers is and you can maybe even main the Meowls, right? I think maybe that is the way to go with board breakers. And yeah, but then again, you know, it's tough if they make Dweller, but if you multi-army them, maybe they won't consider Dweller. I don't know. So this video has been pretty long already, and I only got to talk about this, so maybe I don't know when I'll call this video, to be honest. But see you guys next time.